In my closing statement, I'd like to draw together the threads in this debate and try to come to some conclusions. You remember I said that the decision as to whether or not God exists will be a matter of weighing the reasons to think that God exists against the reasons to think that God does not exist. Now, have we seen compelling reasons in tonight's debate to think that God does not exist? Well, it seems to me not. Most of these arguments that Dr. Flew gave were based on the incompatibility of omnipotence with God's not getting his way in the world. But he never refuted my explication of the Molinist doctrine of conservation and concurrence, which explained why there may be worlds that are not feasible for God, because he cannot guarantee how free creatures will choose. With respect to God's being incorporeal, I explained that we have an acquaintance of ourselves as immaterial agents, and this gives us a good explanation of things like intentionality, freedom of the will, and so forth, and that there's no reason to think God can't be an unembodied mind, and little response has been made to those arguments. So I think there's negligible, if any, weight to the arguments for atheism tonight. Now, what about the 5 reasons I gave to think that God does exist? First, I argued that God provides, or that there is a deductive argument for God as the explanation of the origin of the universe. First of all, we saw that the universe began to exist, and that whatever begins to exist has a cause. And the whole debate is really hinged upon whether that causal premise is more plausibly true than not, and it seems to me clearly that it is. Kai Nielsen, who is an atheist philosopher at the University of Calgary, would agree with me on that score. Nielsen says this: suppose you suddenly hear a loud bang, and you ask me, what made that bang? And I reply, nothing. It just happened. Nielsen says you would not accept that. In fact, you would find my reply quite unintelligible. Well, now, what is true of the little bang is also true of the big bang. It also must have had a cause. Something cannot come out of nothing, and therefore there must exist a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and personal creator of the universe. The second argument, based on the fine-tuning of the universe, has gone completely unrefuted in tonight's debate. My third argument from objective moral values finally elicited a response in the last speech. Dr. Flew said it's fallacious to think that if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist, because human beings are not merely animals. There's a difference between life and death. But I fail to see why that's important. There's a difference between live zebras and dead zebras, but a lion doesn't do anything wrong when it kills a zebra. Richard Taylor, an eminent ethicist, asked us to imagine a race of people living without customs or laws, and he says, suppose one person kills another one and takes his goods. He says such actions, though injurious to their victims, are no more unjust or immoral than they would be if one animal did it to another. A hawk that seizes a fish from the sea kills it, but does not murder it. And another hawk that seizes the fish from the talons of the first takes it, but does not steal it, for none of these things is forbidden. And the same considerations apply to the people he is considering. So Dr. Flew admits there are objective moral values, and I say that's great, but his worldview lacks any foundation for why human beings have objective worth and inherent dignity. I offer you a foundation in a transsubjective, objective foundation in God. What about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus? Again, Dr. Flew did exactly what Professor Pannenberg accused him of doing. He simply says the evidence is insufficient, but he doesn't engage himself with the evidence. Remember, I pointed out that critical New Testament historians agree that the empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances, and the origin of the disciples' faith are all established historical facts. So I'm asking Dr. Flew, what is a better explanation of those than the fact that these men were telling the truth, that Jesus did rise from the dead? Is he going to defend that it was a conspiracy? Is he going to say Jesus wasn't really dead? I mean, what is his alternative? It seems to me that there is no plausible naturalistic alternative to that. Finally, let me just say a word about immediate experience of God. I myself wasn't raised in a Christian home or church-going family, but when I became a teenager, I began to ask the big questions in life. Why am I here? Where am I going? And as I read the New Testament for the first time, I was arrested by the person of Jesus. His words had the ring of truth about them, and there was an authenticity about his character that I couldn't deny. I finally, after a 6-month period of intense soul-searching, just came to the end of my rope and cried out to God. And I experienced a sort of spiritual rebirth. It was though someone turned on the light inside and God became an immediate reality to me, a reality that I've walked with day by day for the last 30 years. If you're searching for God in this way, I want to encourage you to do the same thing I did. Pick up the New Testament and read it and ask yourself, could this really be true? It could change your life in the same way that it changed mine.